Well, welcome to another episode of Tech Support. I am joined today by Josh Ashcraft from our friends over at Ross Video. He is a solutions architect for hyperconverged solutions. I got that right?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
okay,
right.
good. All right. And we've got some of your questions. Josh is going to be answering for us today, so let's jump right into it. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So first, Josh, we are sitting in the AVIXA headquarters at the AVIXA TV studio. We are the Association for AV, and we're seeing more of that convergence between broadcast technologies and AV, right? So first question is, how do I approach broadcast inside of an AV space?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. So, like for different AV needs, depending on what you're trying to get out of it, right? The end product, there's a different segment of equipment that you might need that addresses that, that like a particular function. So like if I am really just cutting a bunch of, like talking heads, I might just need some cameras and an NLE, like, After Effects or Premiere or something like that.
Yep.
But that might, be more like demanding where I need to bring people in live. Like, so I need to have a way to capture, people that are coming in over something like Zoom or Teams or some sort of platform like that. And then, that might get even like bigger where like what's happening there needs to be broadcast live. So, as you step through more of those, you kind of find yourself needing more and more and more, reliable tools and scalable tools. So you might get out of the, like the place where I can just record like a bunch of, like camera feeds on the camera itself to being where I need to pump the video signals back to a different room. I need to give them up, put them all on some sort of, like window so I can see everything that's going on at the same time. I might need to be able to cut them, so that, and then send that, feed out, over, some sort of live stream or something like that. So I feel like as you go through those like different stages on what you actually need, that kind of changes the type of gear that you're interacting with. And at a certain point, you get to the point where you need, like a switcher and you need like a router and a multi-viewer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Considering your end goal, right, is definitely one of the key things. And so, yeah, just speaking from my personal experience, I've worked in corporate settings where we just need a studio space, right, and we kind of record everything and pull it all together. But I think as you begin to see more of those live applications, like you were saying too, you really do have to step it up a little bit, right, with the technologies. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so here's another question then for you. Should I go SDI or IP? What are some of the considerations there?
Yeah. So when you get to the broadcast like level of equipment, the HDMI cable or the DisplayPort cable that like we're used to working with, like plays a smaller and smaller and smaller role. So like what we've been working with for a long time now is SDI. It's kind of a coax cable. It's not the same coax that might be in your house. It's a slightly higher grade like cable with a slightly higher end, plug on the end of it. And like it's, you're kind of going to be the methodology that brings all the stuff, inside of an overall system. So like my cameras are going to send SDI over to like a switcher. Like the switcher might send SDI over to like a router or like an encoder or something like that. It's a much more higher density, kind of higher fidelity cable that can carry, like your video signals as well as 16 channels of audio and then like, like a bunch of ancillary data. So, like time code or captions or stuff like that. IP is something that I feel like a lot of the corporate AV space might be already like used to. Some of those streams. So like NDI is a big one. NDI is kind of finding its way into broadcast. So it's kind of like growing up. Like some of those kind of born like a lot for the AV space. It's kind of growing up into like the overall broadcast space. And that gives you a lot of like unique advantages, I think. Like especially when you can make a IP system work with NDI, or or an SDI system work with NDI. It's kind of like a hybridized system because it allows you to like leverage your actual network, right? So most, if I think about a corporate building, there's probably some layer of like a corporate network that like covers the entire building. It might even cover an entire campus of buildings. So like being able to have some sort of IP tech that I can use without having to run like a dedicated fiber or something like that can really kind of help out in like building these systems out. If I were to make an entire SDI system over an overall campus, I'd have to have fiber. I can only really run an SDI signal about 300 or so feet. before the signal starts like rolling off, and that really, and that changes based off of whether you're 1080p or you're UHD or something like that. So having the ability to leverage an actual overall network is really helpful, and NDI is great for that because it has it's still pretty real time, right? But it's also compressed at the same time. So whereas like an SDI, like a 1080p signal is around 3 gigs a second. That can put a lot of strain on an overall network. So if you can put something out that might be only like one or it could be like 100 megs or 150 megs. That's a lot easier to transport.
Yeah.
But then there's also too like a big thing in the in the IP space and broadcast is this thing called SMPTE 2110. So 2110 is an uncompressed like SDI over IP technology. So we're like leveraging IP networks to send uncompressed video and audio and ancillary data over a network. And that's like there's like unique advantages when we look at compressed technology versus uncompressed technology. And like I think the biggest line is it depends on the network, right? So if you have the bandwidth, like 2110 might be like a more viable option. But if you don't have a bandwidth, obviously something compressed like NDI helps out a lot. But the thing, like the biggest, like a differentiator between those, other than whether they're compressed or uncompressed, is like the compressed version is going to be the entire signal, video and audio in one package. Whereas the uncompressed, we're going to have a separate essence for video, separate essence for audio, and a separate essence like for ancillary. So if I'm thinking about the fact that I might be bringing in video from a conference room in building A and the studios in building B, and I need to get that audio out of that video signal, there's a step I have to take there, right? I have to turn that, NDI stream back into SDI so I can pull the audio off and then send it someplace. Whereas in 2110 or SDI, it might be a little bit easier to pull that out. It also kind of deals with scale as well. I think in SDI, you can kind of stick with like if you know what you need and that's going to be what you need for like several years in the future, SDI is a great option for that. I don't think we're gonna like when 2110 especially came out on the industry a couple of years ago. I think a lot of people kind of panicked a little bit and like, I got to jump on the 2110 bandwagon. And I think as we've gotten some experience and some feet wet, and we have a better idea where the technology is going to land, I think like SDI is still a completely viable option.
Yeah.
And it works really well for a lot of people who don't necessarily need a lot of infinite scale or run a lot of parallel UHD video signals or don't want to invest in a really expensive, like basically data center grade network and all the clocking and all the gear that you have to buy to support all that. So and then like now that we have like the ability to kind of bring SDI and NDI into the same fabric and convert between them seamlessly really helps out.
Yeah. One more just as a follow-up that I want to ask. You mentioned 2110, but what about IPMX? Hear a lot about that as well. How does that kind of factor in as well?
So like I think it's going to play more kind of in the NDI space, right? So like it drastically reduces all the other supporting equipment that you need. I mean, for 2110, just the amount of money that people can spend on switches, because you have to have like a specific switch. Like it's not just something you can go to Best Buy and you buy off the shelf. You have to have a very specific switch that does a very specific set of features to make your 2110 work. And it has a role and has a place, in certain industry segments. But like I think IPMX in a lot of ways that NDI problem solves things that both SDI and 2110 can't solve. Like I think IPMX is going to be more or less another option to like solve like certain problems that NDI will be. So we're still kind of seeing like IPMX kind of gets feet up around like kind of up into the industry. There's not a ton of equipment that supports that yet from what we've seen in the same way that there is NDI gear. But I think as that kind of gets its feet underneath of it and people start like considering it like while they're playing out their systems and like trying to like address their needs, for example trying to bring things over a WAN or trying to bring things in over your buildings where they don't have enough fiber space to bring an uncompressed signal in either IP or SDI. And they're trying to leverage their actual like corporate networks, and they're trying to like not have so many different protocols, right? Like one of the things is like I might have like a bunch of gear that's like making the broadcast happen, but I also might be taking the finished product of that broadcast live and sending it out to a bunch of TVs in like a lobby area, or sending it out to the web, and that usually is a different stack of protocols and transport mechanisms than everything else. I think IPMX and NDI kind of have like a little bit of promise where they might close that gap a little bit, where we don't have to have like, oh, here's our internal like broadcast protocols and here's our external broadcast protocols. We can all kind of like, this is everything, and we're only using this one technology.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of choices there. So
a lot of choices. Yeah, there's more shit up on the market every day. It seems like.
Yep, that's great. All right, next question then is, what is EDL? So could you define that for us, and then how can you leverage it?
Yeah, EDL is kind of a cool thing that's existed for a little while. It stands for Edit Decision List, and so we kind of like shift into like a stack of ROS gear, right? So like I might have a board meeting, so like I have like a couple cameras in like a boardroom, and I might have some board members that are out in the field somewhere, right? So it's like in some way I'm bringing their video signal in. Now, like I might want to have some sort of record of this, right? Like maybe not, maybe it isn't like a board meeting. Maybe it's like a shareholders meeting or something like that, where it might be something that is after it's produced and might be put like available online, for consumption after the fact. So like I might not want to take the live product of that and then just like make one like video file out and you put it on YouTube or out on the air or anything like that. Like I might want to like kind of dress it up a little bit. Like I might have like cut like a little too early. Like I might have cut like a little too late. I might have cut to the wrong thing. So like the idea is there's this concept called like ISO recording or like isolated recording, where we just pretty much take every single camera feed and we send it to its own like recorder and we record just that camera feed. So at Ross, we make a product called the Tria and the Mira, and they're like in they're multi-channel like record boxes that can like record like the video. So like if I have like a bunch of cameras in the boardroom or a bunch of cameras in the conference room, and then a bunch of feeds like coming in, I can take all those feeds and send them off to this extra recording device. But like while I'm live switching, right, like on my switcher, so like at Ross we have a product called like the Carbonite, which is a switcher, like a whole switcher family, and then a product called the like Acuity, and it's a much bigger version of that, like a much more bigger advanced version of that. But on the Carbonite, like while I'm punching that show live, I can feed that like switcher a time code. So there's like an input that says LTC or linear time code on it. I can also plug a like USB like device in the back of that switcher, and as I'm making the cuts on the bus live, it's taking a record of what those cuts are. So like after the fact, I can take that record, I can take all the isolated feeds, drop it into like an NLE, like Final Cut or Premiere or something like that. And then the program will automatically compile. It'll take all the isolated feeds and like the record of all the cuts, and it'll automatically in the timeline build out a representation of what I did like on the switcher. So if I cut too early on something, right, I can like actually adjust on like the isolated recording feed where that cut actually exists at. Yeah. Or if I cut to something that I shouldn't have cut to and I had to cut like really back, I can get rid of that completely and put and like actually put what should have been there in its place. I can fix my mistake, but I'm only fixing mistakes, right? I'm not recutting the entire show. Yep. Right. So having that like ability, like in post really speeds up the post process, and it kind of gives a whole extra tool set to, people, especially if they start off in like on the editing side, right? Like I'm just shooting a bunch of cameras, like dumping them in, like into like an NLE and editing and like and pushing them out. Like especially if they're jumping from those two different sides into like a more, I'm actually cutting a show here. Yeah. It kind of helps, make that transition a little more easier.
Huge time saver.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, for especially even podcasts like this. Yeah. Know, just thinking about the amount of time that if you can be editing while you're recording too, and then you just kind of polish things, that's outstanding. Yeah. So super cool. All right, last question here for you. HDMI, common port in the industry, but what challenges does it pose to broadcast technologies? Yeah.
So broadcast technology generally doesn't use a lot of HDMI cables. Like I mentioned earlier, we like SDI cables, which are coax cables or fiber optic cables, like things of that nature. But in the AV world, they really like HDMI cables and DisplayPort cables, and for good reason, right? They're readily available. Like everything has an HDMI output on it. It seems like, But the biggest difference is there's a color space discrepancy between those two. So like an SDI, we really work inside the YCbCr 422 space. A lot of HDMI, right? Like when you plug in HDMI like monitor into like a PC or a laptop or something like that, there's like a little bit of negotiation that happens there, right? Where like the two are telling them what their capabilities are, and they find out like basically the best they can both work with. And a lot of times what that ends up settling at is something near the RGB or 444 space. 444 requires a little more bandwidth to make happen. RGB is not, like, it's a different color space than YCbCr. And what I've noticed is like, while there is plenty of options to get HDMI into a broadcast system, right? There's like little throwdown boxes that have HDMI ins on the front of it, SDI outs on the back of it, or like boxes that have whole scan converters in them, or like up down crosses, like all kinds of stuff in that to like make the HDMI like signal work with the broadcast signal. Like when you don't have all of that, or you have all that stuff misconfigured, like some gear won't try to actually handshake and figure out what it can do. It will just default to what it already has, and it usually ends up being something in the RGB space. And if it does work, where it comes down to 422, like the signal just kind of looks weird, right? Like all the colors off, it's shifted. What should be green is a different color. So it's like if you think about a like conference room situation or like a boardroom situation or something where like it really doesn't look very good if you're bringing in a laptop and you should just be able to plug it in and it just works, and it doesn't. And then you have to be like, oh, well, you actually have to go to your laptop and change all these settings and like do like this and like click on that, right? That's not a best look. And it also too is not like, it can shake some confidence, like especially if you're a presenter that's just thinking I'm going to give there, plug it in, like do my thing, get down. Like the extra time can make some people jittery. So I think like taking that into mind is like a really right. It's a pretty important consideration to make. I think that the crossroads and intersection we're at right now is really interesting because there's all these new tools, especially with NDI, as NDI is really starting to grow up and become a major player in both the AV space and the broadcast space. Like here at Ross, we just released a new product for our Alteryx platform, which is the Mod NDI card. So we have a router card that goes into our Alteryx platform. It's called the ModX card. It's like a modular card that goes into a modular router. So it's like a modular platform, and like it's like a little sub module that you can stick in there. And like nowadays we can like do things like we can pump out like Teams or Zoom directly out over NDI. It's like now it's not really a thing. Like you used to have to plug into the network, or you have to just make sure you're on some sort of Wi-Fi thing that has access to that like NDI network, and then you can take that feed directly out of your computer into NDI, and then we can bring it into the Alteryx router, and the Alteryx router could send it to like a switcher that might be in the Alteryx router, or to like a switcher that's external to the router that's just plugged into it. And then like we can like reduce the amount of needs we have for external boxes and making sure they're configured right, all that stuff. Like even in non like corporate spaces or AV spaces, like I've still seen a lot of people that oh, here's an HDMI input, plug in, oh, it doesn't work, right? And then you have to go into the settings and configure it. It's like even if you have the time like beforehand to like tweak it and make sure it's all worked, right? Like in broadcast, we call it faxing it out, right? Like even if you have the time to fax the system out, it's still an extra thing you have to do, right? When something that it could just work. Right. So, like I think, especially as we were starting to find like the intersection of all these different like techs that have been like dominant in specific markets kind of blend and cross. Like I think the need for a lot of that stuff is going to go away a little bit. But yeah, the HDMI or like a DisplayPort issue has been something that's plagued us all for a while. You plug it in, it should just work, and it doesn't work. And you unplug it, and plug it into the TV, it does work. You have to figure out why. It's always been something that we've had to worry about. So.
Well, and ease of use, like you were saying, is critical, especially as people, in-house video teams begin to incorporate more broadcast technologies. For them, the learning curve is pretty steep. So I think anything that can make that a lot easier is
for sure
definitely going to be helpful. So. Well, Josh, really appreciate the time. This is great. Thank you for answering a few of our questions and appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.